that is used to make bricks. And they start with hand-built bricks in Mehergarh and then become mold-made bricks during the Kotdiji phase. And it's with this understanding that they used a proportional system as opposed to an absolute system, that there are slight differences in the size of bricks in Harappa, in Mohenjo Daro, in Dholavira, and other sites, because people's fingers are different thickness. So when you measure with your finger, your brick size will be slightly different. But the proportion, 1 to 2 to 4, is the same. So at Harappa, we've been working there, Dr. Meadow and myself, Dr. Dales, since 1986, in collaboration with the Department of Archaeology, Government of Pakistan, and now Department of Archaeology, Punjab. And our strategy for working at Harappa was very different from the work done here in Mohenjo Daro. Everything had been stolen, the bricks had been stolen. So we wanted to try to understand what the whole city looked like. And we excavated many different areas along the city walls, along the outline of the city, to try to understand how this city developed. And by digging deep and cutting through the mound, we could see how the site evolved over time. And we can see that some areas were built first, some areas were built second. When you go to Mohenjo Daro outside in the site, all you see are brick buildings. And Dr. Michael Janssen, I don't know if he's here today, he's outside maybe, but he and his team were the first team to try to document which building was built first, which was built second, and how this city grew. At Harappa, we can see this and we can understand the structure. And around each area of the mounds, there were gateways and there were walls. So these were not open cities, they were walled cities. And at Harappa, part of our strategy to preserve the site is to build replica on top of the site. So at Harappa, the structures are not very well preserved. So what we do is we excavate them, we bury them, and then we build a replica on top. And this was the recommendation of Dr. Dales in 1973 at the conference in Mohenjo Daro. This city is too big to conserve. It's too many buildings. Excavate them, learn about them, record them, document them, rebury them, and then build a small replica on top so that tourists can come and visit. It's not possible to physically preserve this large area, but we need more information. We need to keep digging, keep studying, and then document them, build a conserved building, and then dig some more. So we cannot keep them open because the salts will destroy them. And at Harappa, we have the same issue of the Harappans built and rebuilt many times, and they built mud brick structures. Many of the structures in Mohenjo Daro are mud brick. It's hard enough to preserve fired brick. It's impossible to preserve mud brick because mud brick is very soft and it will crumble. So many of the structures, if you go on the site, you'll see the gray mud brick. This has to be preserved even more effectively than the fired brick. Dholavira also has mud brick structures. These are the city wall on the outside of Dholavira. And here you can see another gateway from Harappa. And part of the gateway is mud brick, part of it is fired brick. So this citadel mound, in my opinion, has a mud brick wall around it with a fired brick gateway. And you'll see the fired brick gateway preserved, the mud brick wall has been eroded. And Uta Franca, who was one of Dr. Janssen's colleagues, made a documentation of this in 1981, and we're still hoping that we can get this publication so that people can understand this situation. So how long does it take to build a city? How many people does it take to build a city? At Harappa, we've done experiments, and we've had the craftsmen replicate the mud bricks. How long does it take to make a wall? And we've been able to calculate that for a certain length of wall, certain size of wall, at Harappa, it would take 610 people 3 months to make. Now, it's easy to get 5 people together. How easy is it to get 600 people together, all making bricks the same size? So you have to have good organization. The bigger wall, which is 1,800 meters, 7 meters wide and 4 meters high, it took 2,000 people to build in 3 months. Now, getting 2,000 people to build and work for 3 months, lagatar, is very difficult, unless you have lots of grain, lots of food, and a good infrastructure. So we need to understand how these cities were built, how they were organized, and who was in charge of them. At Harappa, we can look at this through the excavation. So this is what our excavations look like, and you'll see sections where there are fired bricks left from the walls that were stolen. They're embedded in the mud brick. We also have remains of early walls. And then this is an empty area, which was where the brick wall was. Looking at it from the side, you can see early Harappan wall, built at 2800 BC, first Harappan wall, second wall, third wall, and then a big pakki fasil that is put around it. So we can see the stages of construction, which allows us to identify which activities were going on at different times. The largest wall, if anybody's been to Harappa, this is the big section cut by Sir Mortimer Wheeler. You saw a video of him earlier. In 1946, before partition of India and Pakistan, he excavated in Harappa. He dug a big trench right through the wall, and he recovered this very massive city wall, which shows multiple phases of mud brick construction, and under it is the early Harappan wall, which is the very earliest layer. So this is how we can see and understand sequences of building in a city. The similar process is seen also in Dholavira. So Dholavira, even though it has a stone architecture, was also built partly with mud brick, and Ares Bisht, who excavated this, cut through one of the sections of the wall and was able to show the different construction phases and how the site developed over time. We have similar open areas and gateways in Dholavira and in Harappa. We also have defensive gateways in Dholavira, which show entry into the city, controlling the access into the center part of the citadel, which is an important area for some of the elites to live. And now we're going to come to Mohenjo Daro. Mohenjo Daro was the first plan for Mohenjo Daro by Wheeler, shows the citadel on one side and then the lower town. He groups the lower town all into one area. And my own feeling is that based on the work done by the Italian team and the German team, that actually this lower town is actually multiple walled areas. And that the citadel area is probably a big walled area with multiple suburbs. When Wheeler excavated it, he had seen Kacha Kila, Hyderabad. So when he saw Mohenjo Daro fort, he thought this is like the Kacha Kila. Okay, so you have a big mud brick wall with some fired brick sections, and this is probably what he was envisioning. This is his early excavation. You can see the excavation that he exposed of that wall. You go there today and you'll see nothing like this. So conservation of this site has to replicate what this looked like. Not just putting brick here and there and putting a pushta here and there. It has to be done by carefully studying the plans and reconstructing. Hassan Khokar, who is the curator at Harappa, and Afzal Khan, who's from Punjab, they have done this in Harappa. If you go to Harappa today, you'll see the replicas of the original construction being done, and these are done with bricks, built like Harappan bricks, and they put a turi lepai on top of it to protect the bricks. So I think this is a good model for applying here to Mohenjo Daro as well. Now, how did this city built? We have some models that have been proposed in the past. Michael Janssen has proposed a model of massive platforms on top of which houses were built. Clay was dug from the area around here. We also have the section excavated by Wheeler on the so-called granary and the area just next to that. So Wheeler dug down trying to reach the bottom of the site. If you've looked at the publication report, you'll see that he shows a small person down here at the lowest level. Then too much water came in from the water table and the section collapsed. But you have to look at this in color to understand it better. So I took some pencils and I made it in color. So you can understand that this area is actually streets. These are street levels from the earliest layer, and they are filled with Côte d'Ivoire pottery. This is pottery that dates to 2800 BC. 200 years before the Pakka Harappan begins. So underneath Mohenjo Daro is a Côte d'Ivoire phase town. It's a huge town, and we need to excavate down and find this town. If people can dig tunnels underneath the ocean or underneath the sea, we can dig underneath Mohenjo Daro. Ye koi badi baat nahi. Okay? So it's not impossible. Technically, it's not impossible at all. And we see the early Harappan layers. Then we see the early Harappan, or the earliest Harappan walls made of pakki brick and drains and large platforms, and then these massive platforms built on top of it. So it's a sequence of building phases that took from the Côte d'Ivoire period all the way to the Harappan. We also see models of structures that he thought and other scholars thought were granaries, and the reconstruction of what these things look like. In his photograph, it looks like this is one large structure here, okay? But actually, there are some other photographs that have just come to light that were given by him to Norman Hammond. And Norman Hammond gave them to Harappa.com website. And those photos are now available. So if you look on this area now, this photograph, can you see this V-shaped drain? There was actually a drain in this building that got filled up with bricks. It wasn't a solid wall. It was made of two buildings with a drain in between, and then that building filled up and they built it above it. So this massive building that they called the granary was not one building. It was multiple buildings built at different times, remodeled, and then eventually capped with a wooden structure. So the interpretations have to change. We need to think about how to interpret these sites better. The areas that they excavated, they drew these plans. You can go walk through DK area or HR area. You'll see many houses. But these were all built at different times. And this was a changing neighborhood. And Dr. Janssen and his team tried to reconstruct some of these things by looking at the registers and placing the objects in their rooms. This provides us some very important information about how the houses were used. We also know that the cities had massive streets that allowed access into and out of the neighborhoods. These were things that linked all parts of the city, not just the citadel and the elite areas. They also had bathing platforms, which were associated with wells, and there were public wells. But in Harappa and Mohenjo Daro, they only found 2 latrines. There's a city of 100,000 people. So where did they go to the bathroom? Not in the streets, actually, because they went in toilets like at Harappa. In Harappa, we have commodes, pots set in the room that were used as toilets. And every one of the houses in Mohenjo Daro had those as well. But the early scholars did not notify. They had bathing platforms. And these pots that they found in the rooms, you can look at the old photographs, every room almost, or every house has one room with the pots in the room. These are the latrines. They called them post-cremation burial urn. They thought they were used for burials, but they were not used for burials. These were just a place for the latrine, and then this would be cleaned out periodically. They also had this idea in Harappa, but we've done studies there, and in Harappa we can say that these are latrines. We even find the lota that has fallen into the latrine. So we know that they used lotas and water just in the same tradition as we see today. And all of the houses in Mohenjo Daro also had chulas. When my professor George Dales excavated, he said he never found a kitchen because the excavation techniques were different and details of recording were also different. In Harappa, every house has a kitchen. And those kitchens are usually located in the northeast corner of the courtyard or northeast corner of the room. This is the northeast portion where the first light in the morning comes. So people who cook in the morning early, they have to be somewhere where the light comes. And this is a feature that we can see in the Harappan houses from Harappa. We also have re-examined many of the buildings at Harappa, which help us to reinterpret them. So even though it's been many years since excavation of Mohenjo Daro, re-excavation of some of these buildings could help us understand what they were for. We re-excavated the great granary at Harappa and found there's no evidence for it to be a granary. In fact, it may be a textile mill or some kind of structure for textile processing. And the so-called workers' platforms at Harappa, we were able to demonstrate that they are possibly for dyeing, for making indigo dye. So this shows that you can look at the structures that were excavated before and learn something new about them. So these can be redone and properly studied. And one of the features of Mohenjo Daro that is important, that has not been well studied, is the Great Bath. But we have many excavations from Dholavira, from Lothal, that now help us understand the water structures that were being built by the Harappan people. So these are some drains used for collecting water in the wells and in the tanks for conserving water. And water harvesting is an important feature that has to be done and understood in this region. And those include wells inside the tanks And here's a series of huge tanks that linked all of the reservoirs at Dholavira. And so coming back to the issue of the Great Bath, nobody has excavated underneath the Great Bath. There's only one Great Bath in all of Indus civilization. How did this just happen? Maybe there was an earlier version that was built below, and if we dig beneath it and properly conserve it, we may find early evidence for the development of this technology. We also don't know what's underneath the stupa. The stupa is capping a very important area of Mohenjo Daro. And Dr. Dales and many scholars have proposed removing the stupa to dig underneath and building it again. You can build it back. Much of the bricks have eroded anyway. Dr. Dani, Ahmad Hassan Dani, said, move the stupa, I will give you one from KP. So maybe DG Archaeology, Abdul Samad, he can give us a stupa from KP if we take the stupa off. But I'm not joking. We need to know what's underneath that stupa, because the stupa was built on top of a very important Harappan building. And if we don't remove it, we won't know what's there. And we know what the stupa is. We can document it three-dimensionally. We can tunnel underneath it. There are ways to excavate beneath it. People excavate beneath, palaces in Paris, underneath, big churches in England. So we can dig beneath a stupa in Pakistan. It's not a big deal. Technically, we can do this. So I just want to say that major advances have been made about the Indus civilization. We know a lot about it now, but we need to know more. And Mohenjo Daro is the one place where we can really find some very key information about the origins, the character and development, and the nature of this civilization that is not found in any other site. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I would thank all the three speakers today, Dr. Markinar, Dr. Madela, and Dr. Samad for their presentations, excellent presentations. And I would also like to thank the organizers who have given me the opportunity to come here and sit as chair in this session, in the first session. I am very honored. So anyway, thank you. So regarding the first paper presented by Dr. Marco Modella, he's an archaeobotanist, and we met nearly 40 years back when he came to Khairpur University, and he was, not 40, it was the early 90s, when he came to Shah Abdul Latif University to do some archaeobotanical studies on the Rodi Hills and the surrounding plains with Dr. Byaji and the team from archaeology in Shah Abdul Latif University, Khairpur. Since then, we have not been in touch, but we have been hearing what he's been doing everywhere. So this paper was very interesting in a way that he was talking about two things, demic and the diffusion. So how this Neolithic period and the Neolithic evidences that have traveled from near